Here's the shocking truth about real estate influencers who claim financial freedom. Most of them are lying. So, why are they influencers? It's because their portfolio doesn't pay them enough cash to be financially free. So, they sell info products and courses and programs, and you get the picture. But here's the one reason why most real estate investors who desire financial freedom will never achieve it. The reason why I know this to be true is twofold. I used to be a real estate agent who specialized in working with investors for over 10 years. And I'm a real estate investor myself of 18 years, and I faced this one game-crushing dilemma while I was trying to scale to financial independence. Once I found a solution to the dilemma, I was able to skyrocket my real estate portfolio from $3 million in holdings to over $15 million in holdings. And I'm going to cover what that dilemma is and also how you can overcome it and actual actionable solutions that you can take that I'll cover at the end of this video. So I want to set the stage for the typical investor who faces what I call the scale dilemma. The typical person that starts investing in real estate, whether it's a single family or a small multifamily deal, is usually working a job. They have to have some sort of income in order to support themselves while they are accumulating a real estate portfolio. And so the typical reason for most investors wanting to invest in real estate to begin with is financial freedom, financial independence. They want to be able to walk away from their job at some point in time and actually be able to live life on their terms, be able to travel with the family, take spontaneous trips, so on and so forth. There is a small set of real estate investors who actually do, they want to own a couple of rental properties to, supplement retirement when they turn 65 and start collecting Social Security and that sort of thing. But most people actually want to retire early. And that's the reason why they start. They have visions of, scaling from maybe a couple duplexes all the way to several, let's say 20 to 30 duplexes, or even taking their smaller portfolio and then upgrading to larger commercial assets that will pay them more cash flow. And I'm going to kind of go through setting the stage and building the context around what this actually looks like, because this is exactly what I went through myself. And also a lot of the times when I was a real estate agent working with investors, how they started off this journey. I have to tell you, when I sold an investment property to a real estate investor, that like clockwork, if they didn't commit to scaling that portfolio, I would get a call 3, 4, 5 years later, like clockwork, from that investor telling me they want to dump their property. That novelty of, let's say $500 a month in cash flow wears off pretty quickly. Their priorities shift. A lot of times they buy one property and then they self-manage and they start to see some early signs of success. But their priorities start to shift when they have a family, for instance. Like I talk about this a lot. At this point in time in my life, I have 2 kids. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I just want to go home and hang out with my kids. I don't want to be going grinding and looking at properties after work and that sort of thing. What ends up happening is they're self-managing, they're starting to see a certain amount of cash flow, and then they start to buy a few more properties. And now they start to burn the candle at both ends, okay? Because they're self-managing, they're responsible for coordinating repairs and maintenance, or doing the repairs and maintenance themselves, collecting rents, chasing rents around town, showing their apartments, leasing units up, and all the other administrative tasks that go with actual property management. At a certain point in time, as they start to scale, like let's say from 2, 3 families to another 3 family, they can't keep up with the actual management operations of the buildings that they own, the small multifamily properties that they own. So what ends up inevitably happening is they need help, so they end up hiring a property manager. At this point in time, this is when cash flow starts to disappear, because now they're paying a property manager 10% of what the collected rents are. And also they're probably paying more for repairs and maintenance, because those property management companies actually mark up their labor, or even if they're subbing out to an actual handyman to take care of those repairs and maintenance, then that cash flow starts to disappear over time, okay? So what they thought was going to pay them $500 a month in cash flow, or $750 in cash flow, ends up going down to, let's say, a couple $100 in cash flow, or $300 in cash flow. And so at the same time, if they offload the management because they can't handle it anymore with all the other priorities that they have, because at this point in time, maybe they got married, maybe they have kids, finding good properties with built-in equity that can allow them to use the BRRRR strategy, the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, it takes a lot of time, along with everything else they have going on in their life. So before you know it, you start to realize that each one of these deals you are working so hard to take down only pay you those, few $100s a month in cash flow. So this is what I started to wonder. So I started to wonder, like, should I start to, should I work overtime or get a promotion or do DoorDash on the weekends? And people start to realize that as they start to get paid more at their W-2 job, they realize that, hey, the novelty of this thing is wearing off. I can just get a promotion at work and not have to tie up a bunch of my cash in real estate deals as a result of it. So, and by the time you accumulate enough properties, you start looking at the cash flow before you hired a property manager. This is the situation that I went through. So I started looking at what I was paying the property manager. It was like, let's say, $40,000 a year on all the properties that I accumulated. And then, I started justifying quitting my job in order to capture that cash flow, what I was paying the property manager, and go back to self-management. So I went from self-management to third-party management, back to self-management before. But what I realized, and what a lot of other real estate investors are looking to scale, is they realize that they just created a job for themselves as a property manager, which is, you know, I used to be a property manager. It's probably the worst job in the world. Okay. It's a thankless job. All you're dealing with is problems. You never get a tenant that calls you up like out of the blue and just says like, hey man, you're doing a really great job. So the burnout factor is really a real thing when it comes to property management. So yes, you're making more cash flow, but you're still in the rat race of trading your time for dollars with your brand new job as a property manager. So over the long term, property management becomes miserable, and then you'll start to wonder, like, should I just go back to work? This is all the stuff that was going through my head and stuff that I actually did during my journey to scale. So some of the other things that start to go through investors' head is like, should I just dump these properties? Like, they're not paying me really anything that's substantial. I'm making more money at work. Maybe I should just stick to the plan. Maybe I should just invest in like stocks and mutual funds, that sort of thing. Another question is, should I hire a property manager again and say goodbye to the cash flow and maybe start flipping houses if you've walked away from your job, for instance? And the problem with the flipping houses, and this is like one thing you'll see with a lot of influencers that have accumulated a portfolio of smaller rental properties, is that these people like flip houses. It's like, oh, I just like doing it. I like flipping houses. Well, I know a lot of house flippers, and it's really not that fun. Okay. Grinding, finding deals, putting the financing together, managing contractors, selling the property, and then you get, whacked with ordinary income tax after you sell a property. Right? So I went through all these exact scenarios and thoughts in my head. And so when I started networking with investors who were not financially independent, but also lived in peace, I was like, what was the secret? And what I mean by living in peace is that there's this overemphasis and glorification of financial freedom. But what I learned going through this journey in my career of over 18 years is that, yes, I value financial freedom, but also at this point in time in my life is I value peace as well. So being able to come home and not have to think about all the other operations in my business and the management stuff and, flipping houses, if that's the other, component that you add into your thing to actually make active income. The common denominator after all these interviews I did with the actual investors that I admired that actually had financial freedom, like actual real financial freedom, the common denominator was commercial real estate. This is when I got my first like kind of like aha moment while I was midstream through this journey. And so during all these interviews, I started to ask the question, like, why? Like, why is commercial real estate the ticket? And so number one is the economies of scale. Like when you have a larger property, you have actual professional property management that is interested in managing that property and not killing you with management fees. They have the economies of scale because they have a lot more units under one roof. They're not scattered site across an entire city or an entire town or multiple towns. So you have economies of scale where you can actually get systems in place for those. Systems are so important, but systems for like, let's say you don't need really any systems, which is, you waste a lot of time. It's very inefficient. But once you start to scale into, let's say 20, 30, 50 unit apartment deals or retail strip plazas or commercial industrial properties, that sort of thing, they become a lot less management intensive. So therefore, you can build a commercial real estate portfolio while still working your full-time job. And you don't have to be busy doing it. So you can actually buy one juicy commercial deal a year and be able to start chipping away at those long-term financial goals, which might be walking away from your W-2 or 1099 or whatever you're trading your time for dollars for. Because each and every deal that these commercial investors that I interviewed early on with, they didn't add 5 figures to their wealth every time they did a smaller deal. They put 6 figures and even 7 figures added to their wealth with each and every deal that they did. For instance, my client Brian in Go Bigger Sooner, He is a full-time executive at a company that's in the S&P 500, Fortune 500 company, and he has a demanding job. And he accumulated a portfolio of smaller multifamily properties. And so just this past year, he was able to take down a 56 unit deal. And by the time, fast forward to a couple weeks ago, he was able to increase the rent about $80,000 a year without having to do any work to the property and add about $1 million, $1.1 million to his net worth in the process, and $80,000 a year in cash flow. How many properties do you actually have to buy and grind through in order to produce $80,000 a year in true cash flow? Okay. And that's what Brian did. So, how do they do it? Right. First off, number one, it starts with education, educating yourself using videos like this, and starting to really build your network early and with intentionality. Okay. So if you're looking to graduate and swim upstream into larger commercial deals, start hanging out with the people and networking with the people that are actually in that deal space. For one, you can actually learn a lot of actionable type of things that apply directly to the business. Not this like theoretical stuff that you hear from like books or listen on podcasts, but also it starts to become a lot more real when you start hanging out with people that are actually active in what you want to do. So those are two things: education, networking. The second thing is that they overcame the self-doubt and just grabbed themselves by the gonads and just did it and never looked back. So when you start to educate yourself and you start hearing the same things over and over again in terms of methodologies associated with scaling into commercial real estate, and it starts to sound all the same, that's usually an indication that you need to start taking action. There's not this secret magic nugget that if only you had that thing, like the universe would give you permission to join the big leagues in commercial real estate. So at some point in time, you just have to jump into it and do it. Because I firmly believe knowledge without mileage is bullshit. Okay. You're going to have to take action and apply what you've learned. And that's going to take a certain amount of faith in jumping into it. Number three, they learned how to pull the curtain back on how real estate finance worked with commercial banks and use strategies to scale their portfolio without having access to cash as a bottleneck to their growth. So how can I buy a $2 million property? Don't you need a ton of cash? This is something that a lot of people, ask when they're in smaller multifamily and looking to graduate into commercial. And the answer is no. You can use a lot of creative financing strategies, but you have to know on the other end how commercial banks work, how commercial appraisals work in the process. So like my client, Josh, he just made over $800,000 in his first industrial property in less than 12 months using creative financing and none of his own money. And this was a bigger deal. This is a deal that was purchased for $765,000 and he pushed it to like $1.4 million within less than 12 months. Okay. And he's in the process of refinancing that property. And I've trained him exactly on how commercial banks work, how commercial lending works, what they're looking for, and also how the commercial appraisals work on properties that are like that. So he knows exactly if he does X, Y, and Z to that property, what it's going to be worth when he takes it back to his bank. So the bottom line is this, is that true financial freedom is if true financial freedom is your most ardent desire, you need to scale into much larger deals than what you are doing right now. So when is the appropriate time to do this? I'm going to tell you right now. And I'm actually going to cover some actionable type of stuff that you can do towards the end of my manifesto here. So it's going to take you just as much time to transition from residential to commercial investing, whether you start now or whether you wait 1, 3, 5 years. So that's the reason why it's important to start now, especially if you have some experience. If you have no experience at all in owning rental property, then I would say, buy a small property, buy what's comfortable for you, buy an STR, buy a single family house, buy a duplex. You have to get the experience first, but you don't have to have a tremendous amount of experience. The experience I thought that I needed to have I needed to wait until I had 76 doors or 76 units of multifamily property before I thought that I had permission to do larger deals. You do not have to wait that long. You do not have to wait 11 years like I did. So bring a property full circle, and then, you can start to educate yourself on graduating to commercial. You do not have to wait like I did, right? So start educating yourself with stuff like this, but I would steer clear away from education around real estate syndications. When you start to Google and YouTube, how to buy commercial real estate, you're going to start hearing this word syndication, right? When I first heard this word, it almost made my head hurt, right? It is basically the pooling investors' money together to buy larger multifamily and commercial real estate deals. And it requires, it's regulated. There's a lot of reporting required. It's very expensive. You have to hire an SEC attorney to do that. you do not need to do that stuff, right? So steer clear away from that stuff that's around education around syndications, because if your objective is to, let's say buy a $1 through $5 million commercial property, a real estate syndication is just not going to be. And I've accumulated a $15 million portfolio that has gross rents of around $2.2 million a year without ever having to do a syndication. So I truly believe that you can acquire your first $10 million in commercial income property without ever having to do a syndication, while putting together creative financing deals or joint ventures, all while keeping some, if not all, of the equity, right? So the important piece of that is that when you do two, maybe three transactions and accumulate enough wealth and cash flow to walk away from your job in less than 2 years, so that you can focus 100% on your work on scaling your portfolio to the moon. And then maybe you might want to do syndications at that point in time. But it's completely irrelevant, I believe, in my sole opinion, that you need to start educating yourself on syndications. It's just not relevant to where you are, especially if you're looking to buy larger stuff. All right. The next thing you can start doing right now is start walking and analyzing deals, or analyzing properties that you find on LoopNet and Crexy. And when you do that, it makes it so much more real. And I'm actually going to go into what LoopNet Crexy looks like, an exact thing that I do to start the process of my education through this.
Okay, so this is what LoopNet looks like. So this is actually like if it's the biggest equivalent to the MLS for commercial real estate. Now, the multiple listing service is where most residential properties are listed and sold on the open market. Commercial brokers post investment properties for sale, typically on LoopNet, right? So a lot of times you're going to hear through your education process that LoopNet and Crexy is where real estate deals go to die, or the trash bin of commercial real estate. Okay, you're probably not going to find a ton of great deals on LoopNet. They're not abundant, but it's a great place to start. And this is how you can actually start now. So first of all, we're going to go off to for sale. We're going to enter a location like Rochester, New York. Oh, enter a property type. Let's say we're looking at multifamily property. Okay, just to keep things simple. All right. So we're going to go to Rochester, New York. All right, cool. So now what I start to do is I start to look at properties that are going to sort of match what I am looking for. So right here, for instance, okay, so we have a 41 unit apartment building in Panera Trail, Mountain Lake Apartments. Okay. So I go through here, and typically the reason why they call this the commercial trash bin of real estate is because typically these are properties that are listed by owners that are really not motivated to sell. Typically how most brokers work is that they will, when they get a listing agreement signed, or they make contact with an owner that may be open to an offer, is that the broker will start to try to sell the property off market to somebody that they know. A lot of times these off market deals don't even have a listing agreement signed with the owner, because the owner is like, hey, I'm not really motivated to sell, but if you got an offer for me, I might consider, selling the property, right? Listing broker says, hey, do you mind if you sign a listing agreement? And oftentimes the owner's like, hey, listen, I don't want to sign a listing agreement. I'm really not, I'm really not motivated to sell. Okay. So they'll go around and shop this to people that are in their network, right? So why is this important to you right now as it pertains to cruising on LoopNet and Crexy, for instance, is I take properties that I would, be interested in possibly owning. And even if it's overpriced or not the perfect location, or there might be things that don't entirely match about it, but it's a deal size, like let's say a 41 unit apartment building, then I'll contact the broker, right, to get information on the property to start to build rapport with that person. By the way, I do have a training on this in the next video. By the way, I have two videos that are next after this one. If you're interested, the case study on how my client Brian increased the value of the property he bought, the 56 unit, by $1 million less than 1 year, and $80,000 in cash flow. Remember that story? And I also have next video how to actually work with brokers and how to build those relationships specifically from a tactical standpoint. So the benefit to doing this is actually it's twofold again, right? So you are building a relationship with the broker. You're communicating to them exactly your buying criteria in terms of what you're looking to buy. And then also the act of walking a property and also analyzing the property makes it more real, right? Because when you're just thinking about it from a theoretical standpoint, oh, I want to own a commercial property, I want to own a 40 unit apartment building someday. Nothing is more real than actually walking that property and analyzing it and figuring out how to make it real. So I think that's incredibly powerful. It was powerful for me. my transition from residential to commercial, right? So additionally, another homework that you could do, right? If you're serious about doing commercial, just start telling everybody you know about this next chapter in your life, ascending into larger deals, and document each step along the way on your social media. I cover this and it's part of my 1-1-2-3 method, but starting to tell the world about it because this is going to become incredibly important later on. Investing the time in terms of thought leadership platform associated with the next chapter you're looking into. It's going to become important later on when you're looking to raise private money for your ever growing real estate empire. All right. So those are some homeworks that I put together for you. I'll put down the homework down in the description below. But if you got value out of this, please subscribe and tune in because I drop new long form educational content weekly. Right. Plus, I have a podcast called Go Big Live where I interview the titans of commercial real estate, exactly how they did their first bigger deal, which breaks down all the actionable stuff in excruciating detail so you can do right that you can do right now your journey to go bigger sooner. Or if you are want to talk one-on-one with me and get help on establishing a goal and a roadmap to get there, you can book in a free 1-hour consult below in the description. And also, if there's any other questions you want answered about the content I dropped here, drop a comment. I'll answer it personally, right? Or if you're looking for content that's outside of what I covered today, drop in the comments below, and I'll put together another video like this. So, anyways, all that being said, thanks for tuning in, and keep in mind, you can go bigger sooner.